and welcome to VTalk Finance interview series. Today we have Mick with us. Can you please introduce yourself?
Of course, my name is Mick. I am 26 years old. I'm from the Netherlands and I'm currently doing an internship and will still do my master's after my internship that I'm doing right now.
Sounds cool. And Mick has a very impressive resume. So let's maybe start with the first internship that you've done at the ABN AMRO, MeesPierson.
Right,
yeah?
right.
Is it somehow different from the ABN AMRO, the normal one or the main one?
Yeah, basically ABN AMRO MeesPierson is the private bank.
Yeah.
And so what the private bank, ABN AMRO MeesPierson, does as well, or primarily is serving private clients. That I believe when I was there, they had, they served private clients with a net worth of over 500,000 euros. And so that is basically what happens there. So they have investment advisory, they have asset management services they provide. So a lot of different things going on right there. And exactly, that was my first internship. So that was kind of where I learned the ropes in finance and asset management and investment advisory, kind of learned what was there. So very interesting experience.
What was your role there during the internship?
Basically, I worked for the investment center. It's been a while already, so some details might have escaped my mind. But basically, I worked at the investment center, and what happened there is that we basically received messages from the analysts about financial markets. So, for example, if a Shell would have shot up on a certain day by 5% or 10%, we would basically turn those activities into concrete messages for clients, so that they could anticipate what to do with their investment portfolios, whether they're selling or buying and stuff along those lines. So that is basically what I was doing. Yeah.
That sounds quite interesting. And as I recall, you've done it like 4 years ago from your resume.
Right. I don't even know exactly how long ago it was, but it was, I think, something like
quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
And that was your first internship.
Exactly.
So how did you get in there? What was the main advantage that you had at that point?
Well, I think, quite frankly, my grades were quite decent, so that definitely played a role. When COVID hit, I still, I started focusing a bit more on my studies than I was doing, before COVID hit. And so that definitely played a part. I had some decent grades, did some committee work. And so I think primarily what I just did is just apply to a lot of different banks. And I even applied to private equity funds, even though I barely knew what it was, quite frankly. And so, just trying things out and applying. And then, it happened and I got in. So.
In which year were you at that point?
The third year of my bachelor's. So that was quite tough occasionally because I was doing uni on the side and it was a full-time internship. But in the end, I really enjoyed that, for sure. Yeah.
And then you graduated from the university, you finished the internship, and then I saw that you started at the Kleine Consultant as a strategy consultant.
Right.
Can you maybe please tell a bit more about what it is? Because as I understand, it's a student-led project, right?
Exactly. So it's a student-run organization, and what they do, I would quite frankly recommend it to everyone if you are able to join. Is that they provide 10-week-long consulting projects, mostly for nonprofit organizations, smaller scale-ups, startups, but also sometimes some corporates. And it's basically what you work on is projects that are really focused on, doing good. So it sounds a bit cliche, but it's just, usually focused on, projects that focus on the betterment of society in some way, And so for me, that was really the first time that I got to interact with consulting, and I think the beauty of consulting, or at least those projects I worked on, was that you really learn how to structure a problem properly, and I think that really helped me even after it just really helped me build kind of the skill of looking at problems, zooming out, and then slowly starting to zoom in gradually. So it was very.
And when you were joining the Kleine Consultant, did you think that you would want to work as a strategy consultant in the future? And did it shape somehow your understanding of what you actually want to do? Or?
Yeah, definitely. At that point, I think I was very enthusiastic about consulting, and I definitely still think it's a very interesting field. I also organized after that at the FSA an event called the Consultation, which was with a lot of the large strategy consulting firms. So ranging from Boston Consulting Group, McKinsey, and some other parties as well. And that really made me more enthusiastic about the field, but I just noticed that the financial aspect weighed most heavily on my mind when I was considering what I wanted to do in the future. And so I think in banking and also in private equity, that just came together perfectly for me at this point in time.
And for the students that would want to also be a strategy consultant, the Kleine Consulting, what was the workload per week? Is it possible to do it along the studies, or?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, it is possible, but it is at that point in time. The first project I worked on, I think the expectation is around 15 hours a week. So it's definitely, yeah, that is something that you have to take into account. You really learn the ropes pretty quickly within consulting, but it also means you have to put in some hours. Yeah.
That sounds very interesting. I think it would be also nice for all the people to join this firm in the future. And as I understand, after this or during that period, you also joined the Beleggings mutual fund.
Right.
Sorry,
right. Yeah,
I'm not
right.
Dutch, so this word is a bit hard for me to pronounce.
Yeah.
But
no, I get it.
What is that? Because as I understand, it's some also investment firm, also led by students. So if you can also explain more about it.
Yeah, of course. So when I joined the FSA, the board of the FSA, I basically also rolled into the board of the investment club mutual fund. And so what it entails, that investment club, is that you just come together with a group of students, and you just start basically investing in different stocks. You come together once a month, basically, and professionals, they swing by from, for example, asset management firms, to come explain, what the markets look like, how you should actually interpret certain signals on financial markets, and on the basis of that, you just come together and start investing in stocks and bonds and all those kind of things. So that was a lot of fun, and what I did as a board member there was mostly just coming up with a marketing strategy, for example, together, looking at how to attract new members. So really, what a general board member would typically do, I guess, at an organization. So.
What would you say was your most interesting or difficult investment while you were there?
I think we at one point wanted to invest in a bond, and that was basically a bond. Well, it seemed a bit sketchy, but it was a bond that had, that was backed by a bunch of gems in Africa. So we didn't really know what to think of that. It seemed like a pretty unreliable investment, but I think in the end it actually turned out pretty well. Got a pretty big return on that. So stuff along those lines was just pretty entertaining to experience.
That actually sounds very interesting, especially when you're a student to already experience some investments. I think that really could help you when you apply later for the internships, when you have this on your CV.
Yeah.
Would you recommend it to anyone who wants to work in investment banking or?
I think so. I think, if you want to do investment banking, I think the best way to get in there is to just join investment banking events. And then, after a while, actually just applying there, obviously. But I think it really gives you a good sense of what financial markets look like. And that is definitely something, of course, that's very crucial if you want to work in investment banking. So, I think that's definitely useful. And you also start to look at, of course, you come together only once a month. So it's not like you are busy with it a lot every single week. But I think that the beauty of it is that you learn from professionals in the space how to actually assess, for example, investment opportunities, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, that sounds also very cool. And also regarding the workload, comparing, for example, to the Kleine Consultant, how much hours would you say board member?
I think this was not that much, to be honest, because it's only once a month. So I think we were occupied with that maybe 5 to 10 hours a week.
That sounds quite doable.
5 hours a week, probably.
So you can easily do it during the master's or bachelor's, I suppose.
Yeah.
But as I also saw that you at the same time did the board year at FSA, same time as this award, or
they basically overlapped a bit. So at one point I was doing the Kleine Consultant and the FSA board and the mutual fund board, and that was a bit much, quite frankly. But the FSA board is, I think it's approximately 40 to 50 hours a week. The majority of, most of the time, I guess, you are really busy with it more than 40 hours a week, because even during evenings, especially around events, for example, that you organize, a lot has to happen. But I think that is actually the fun of it, and especially a board year is just something that I would really recommend. If you can do it full time, it became one of the most fun years of my life for sure. So I think would recommend that to anyone.
And we were also doing the board years actually the same time as you, when I was in SAFE a year in FSA, saw each other a bit in Borrels or the Constitution Borrels.
Exactly.
Maybe for everyone, could you please tell more about FSA, what it means, like the Financial Aid Association, and what they do?
Of course. So basically what the FSA aspires to do is really to connect students with the labor market. And so what they do is across different sectors, they actually provide a lot of events, career-related events ranging from events in investment banking, private equity, consulting, trading even. And so they basically just allow students to see the whole range of things that are out there within the financial sector, and they do it through organizing a bunch of events in that space. And so I think the great part of that is that you really get to know a lot of people within the field, and you get to interact with a lot of people within the field before you actually start applying, and that will really pay dividends as soon as you start applying. Because I think the people you know are just very crucial in a space that is pretty competitive in some sense.
And emphasize also, as I understand, very large association with a lot of members, but also active members, part of committees. Yeah. How many committees do you have?
We have, I think, when I was active there, we had a bit over 20 committees, and the committees are relatively small because a lot of the events that we organize. One example is the London Banking Tour. 26 students get selected, and committee members also really participate. And so they don't want, of course, they want to select as large a proportion as possible of the people who actually join. So therefore, a lot of the committees are relatively small. So I think in total, when I was there, we had approximately 50 committee members total. And I think, the FSA also has a lot of members indeed across the Netherlands.
And what do you think is the value of joining a committee?
Well, I think the value of joining a committee is really multifold. So first of all, you learn to work in a group, which will definitely be very crucial, of course, when you enter the labor market. But also you just have to, you get to have a fun time, right? So for example, my board year, or even, some committee work that I did beforehand, you just meet new people. You get to work on things that are pretty valuable in some sense, at least for other students. For example, when I was working at the FSA, did the board year there. So I think working together on projects is just fun in general, and you also really get to function in a team.
Mm-hmm. And for students that, for example, would like to become investment bankers or work in private equity, which committees would you recommend to them?
At the FSA specifically?
Yeah, at FSA.
Definitely, if you aspire to work in banking, I think the London Banking Tour and the International Banking Cycle are two events that are very, very valuable. Because there you get to organize, of course, the different days with the banks. And so you get to meet the people at the banks. They can kind of get a sense of who you are as a person, whether you are, whether they would potentially see you work with them. So all those things are just very valuable. And for me personally, I got to jump into the organization of London Banking Tour in the last couple of months, pretty suddenly. Therefore, I could also join the London, and from that I got an internship at Lazard, for example. So. That's basically the way it can work out.
And I've heard that London Banking Tour is quite competitive to be in as a committee, but also to join the London Banking Tour. Is it true?
Right. So I think as a committee member, I was quite lucky because I was on the board, so I could immediately join. But for example, the London Banking Tour committee, they get really numerous applications, and there's only going to be one committee member. So that in and of itself makes it pretty competitive. And indeed, the London Banking Tour, for example, they get hundreds of applications and only ultimately 26 people join. So that also, and what you also see, for example, at an event like that is that people generally already have 2-3 internships. They really know what they want, that they want to go into banking, for example. So you really see that at those events, you probably have to come a bit prepared.
Do you only accept Dutch or international students as well?
I think when I was there, and I think that's still the same for the London Banking Tour, I remember in our group there was one girl who could speak relatively decent Dutch, but she wasn't really fluent. So she was mostly speaking in English, but the event itself is hosted in Dutch because a lot of the people there, they work with clients within the Benelux who speak Dutch. And so therefore, they definitely value it if you also speak Dutch. So that, of course, that can be a bit of an obstacle for international students.
And for the committee members as well, you only hire Dutch students, or?
I think for the FSA, last year they started actually accepting international students for the same reason that I basically just gave. So, of course, if the step from going to all committee members who are fluent in Dutch to a couple of committee members who aren't, you just don't want to, give rise to an atmosphere where those people will cluster with a very small group and the rest will not really interact and merge, But I think now the FSA might already have some international members, and I guess that's kind of a necessity in the end because, more and more people at UVA are internationals. So And we also, you can tell that there's some pressure also from the universities, of course, to start doing that. So yeah, I think there might be some internationals in our school.
And regarding the events, are there any events that are also for internationals?
Definitely. So I don't quite recall anymore which events those were specifically. It's been a while, but I think there were around 4 that the FSA hosted that were indeed suitable for English speakers.
I recall there was asset management tour or something like that. I think
we have the asset management.
Yeah, I think it was for international stuff. Some of the companies hired internationals. Yeah, and I think career cycle or.
Yeah, you have the I think the business orientation days. That's a very large event as well. That's organized with the VSIA. That's another, of course, closely related organization that's around the corner of the FSA office. And I think the business orientation days, for example, is also suitable for English students.
I would definitely recommend students to join those events.
Yeah, it's very awesome. But that's for example, the value of such events where a lot of companies join is that you just get you get a very easy sense of what companies are out there, what they offer, what kind of the culture is like within different companies. So yeah. A big recommendation.
And as I understand, you did a board here in FSA, right? What was your position in the board, and what were your main responsibilities there?
Right. So I was the vice president of the board, and basically I was a bit of the IT man. So I had to do all of the IT-related stuff in the organization. It was also a lot of communication with members. I helped the chairman, for example, or the president, we would call it, set up the whole policy plan, for example, for the organization moving forward. So the growth strategy, all the way up to, for example, the way that we promote the events, things along those lines. And generally, kind of that role that you have as, for example, president, vice president, external, whatever it is, kind of disappears to the background as you start organizing your own events, of course, and then that becomes way more important.
Because you also supervise a lot of events, yes.
Exactly.
You did the same
exactly.
in the board,
So in our case, it was you actually supervised 4 events, and I think that might be one of the most valuable things actually of doing a board here is that you really learn how to organize large projects together with usually very different people. So of course, with 50 committee members, you're going to have a lot of different individuals within one big group, and it's just a lot of fun to kind of learn how to navigate that within smaller committees.
And so you already mentioned the workload for the board, but what about the workload for the committees?
That really differs per committee. So generally speaking, I would say that is kind of a convenient thing about the FSA is that a lot of the events are organized at least partially by the companies that join, right? So for example, at the London Banking Tour, well, you have to organize everything up until the point of leaving, but then of course you go visit the companies and they do most of the stuff. So I think if I would have to give a general indication, I think it wouldn't be more than, on average, 6 to 8 hours a week.
Oh, that sounds quite good, yeah.
And then, of course, if it gets to the event, it can, for example, large events like the consultation, it can definitely go to 15, 20 hours a week. But it's really nothing crazy.
Yeah, that sounds very nicely, and I think it was a very good promotion for FSA.
Yeah.
Definitely students should look
at
this. So. So yeah, moving to your next internship, DC Advisory, right? You did the investment banking internship there.
Right.
So can you please maybe tell us how was the application process, if you can disclose this, and what was your role?
Yeah, of course. So I applied via RD Recruitment, and basically what they do is that they place a lot of people as interns, but also I think in full-time positions at banks, private equity funds, and things along those lines. And so I just connected them and asked them to have an introductory conversation. Quite frankly, that first conversation was just very pleasant. It was a very nice personal conversation, so I got to meet some of the consultants there, and they just quickly referred me to a couple of parties that might have been interested in my CV, and one of them was DC Advisory. And so they basically handed in my CV at DC Advisory, and very quickly I got a call from them saying, "Hey, would you like to interview with us?" There were 3 back-to-back interviews, 45 minutes, I believe. Very soon after, I think the same day or the day after, I got a call, "Hey, would you like to come work for us and do an internship?" So very happy with that. And that is basically how also the investment banking story started for me, because there I noticed when I hit the desk, I can work in PowerPoint. Maybe I worked with it a couple times, but of course, if you sit behind your desk, you really need to start checking on the details and doing things quickly. And so that was, at first, that was kind of getting used to. So some things would go a bit slower than they might, definitely slower than they go now. But I think that was also a very, very good experience for me because I just learned a lot in a very short period of time.
And what do you say about the culture and the working hours? Is it true about the long investment banking working hours for you?
Well, I think of course the culture-wise, every bank is just very different. So I think it's difficult to compare or to just put one label on a whole industry. But I think in general, and also by the way, that also holds for the hours, right? So I think a lot of the large banks, let's say the large names, they definitely require you to work more hours. But I think in general, if you want to go into investment banking, that's just something that you should somehow find thrilling to do. If you just think to yourself, if you're in investment banking, oh, I would never like to work long hours, then probably it might not be a good thing.
What was your longest day that you worked there?
Not the DC advisory specifically,
Okay.
But I've had some, I think, some very long days until, let's say, far beyond midnight. So yeah, definitely that just occurs. That can occur quite frequently during specific projects, or if some deadlines have to be reached. So I think that is just part of it, frankly.
And how long was your internship?
It actually differs. So my DC advisory internship was 4 months. Then I did an internship at Lazard. That was 3 months. And now I'm, of course, doing a private equity internship at Bridgepoint, and that is 4 months.
Okay. So we'll go back to the Lazard internship, because you mentioned earlier that you actually got into contact with them while you were in London banking tour.
Right.
So how did it work for you? Did they reach out to you afterwards, or what was the process for you with Lazard?
For Lazard?
For the Lazard,
the
Lazard internship.
So basically, I could join the London banking tour, and there we were. Basically, you just meet 13 banks within 2 weeks. Very good experience as well. You're with a lot of other students. You also get to have a bit of fun because you have drinks with the banks after and things along those lines. And so basically the way it works there is you go to London, you visit all those banks, and every bank that kind of likes you, they note your name down. And then when you come back, I think we came back on Sunday, and then on Monday, that's like the magical day where all the calls, hopefully of course it will be a positive outcome, call the people that they find interesting. And so on that specific day, all 13 banks will call the people they find interesting, and then soon after the interviews will be planned. So for example, I came back on Sunday, I think, Saturday or Sunday, had my calls on Monday, and had my first interview on Wednesday. So you really, when you join, for example, such an event, you just have to make sure that you're already prepared for the interviews, because you won't have time to prepare while you're in London.
But your interview process was much before you started the internship itself, right? Because in the FSI you were a year before the internship started?
Exactly. So that is a very good point, by the way. You really have to be early. If you want to, for example, if you have your sights set on very specific companies, right? You really need to make sure that you kind of look into their application, their deadlines, kind of the timelines as well. Because in banking, again, it's you really have to start applying usually maybe a bit under a year beforehand, or around a year beforehand. So that is very important to look into if you want to apply.
And you mentioned before that you got your first interview on Wednesday. How was the recruitment process in general? How many steps? What did you have to do?
So for my Lazard internship,
yes.
For my Lazard internship, it was basically, I think they mostly recruit from a pool of people who come through their events. So the London banking, there's not that many actually. You have the London banking tour, you have the international banking cycle. I think there's one other event that you have in Belgium that's very similar. But I think they mostly recruit through those events. And so what happens then is you get a call, whether you want to be interviewed, an interview is planned, and there, for example, I have three back-to-back, small case I had to do, and then very soon after I got a call with the outcome. So. And
you had them all at the same time, no?
Right. So they were all back-to-back interviews, and I think that also might differ a bit per bank. So some banks I know you have some more interviews. Some banks it might be 2 or 3. I think that's kind of the minimum. So it really differs per bank as well, I think.
Mm-hmm. That sounds very nice. And when you were in Lazard, what were your main activities? What was your day-to-day tasks?
Right. So I think what was most interesting about the Lazard internship is that it's a lot of ad hoc work that you do, right? So you just get a request. For example, one thing that I, for example, worked on there a lot was just looking into companies to acquire, quite frankly. So what they do is that they look at investment opportunities for companies or relationships across a broad range of sectors. And then sometimes, for example, I had to look at, okay, there's this whole list of companies within this space that we find interesting. Which ones would be interesting to acquire? For example, you start drafting up these documents together with the analysts, for example, and then you start, basically the seniors start using that stuff, of course, in their meetings with clients and things along those lines. So I think in general, as an intern, and I think that holds basically across the spectrum within investment banking, you really support the analysts and the team in drafting up documents, pulling analyses, things along those lines.
And what would you say was the biggest difference for you in your internship at DC and at Lazard? Regarding tasks, culture, and work-life balance?
Right. I think work-life balance, it was very similar. So at both firms, I just had to work quite a decent amount of hours. I think apart from that, the biggest difference between Lazard and DC Advisory is just the type of companies that they focus on. So Lazard is mostly involved or mostly engaged with listed companies, public companies, and DC Advisory mostly focuses on the mid-market. So companies that generally aren't listed, that are usually a bit smaller in size. So I think those are kind of the main differences. Culture-wise, I think it's a bit difficult to describe. DC Advisory was, we had drinks quite frequently, for example. It was a bit, everyone was very talkative. And at Lazard, it was more, because I think the pressure was a bit higher sometimes. So there would be, a little less, for example, time for drinks or things along those lines. And I think in the end, that is also something that I would recommend to anyone who wants to work in banking. There's pros and cons to any company, so you just really have to feel that for yourself. What do I like? What do I not like? And I think a board year, again, for that is a great opportunity.
And when you're already in the company, for example, in Lazard or in DC Advisory, what would you recommend students to do to get a return offer? Because one thing is to get an internship, but it's much harder to stay in the company, especially such a competitive one as Lazard or DC. So what would be your recommendation?
Well, I think for me, I think the best advice that I could give personally would be to just work hard and also show that you can take initiative, that you actually like the work that you're doing, because at least that is the way it was for me, and I can imagine it's the same for a lot of people who do their first internship. You don't really know what you're getting yourself into, and that is also, in hindsight, that was kind of the fun of it for me. But I think it's very important that you show that you were also detail-oriented, that you can work under pressure, and that you can take initiative, because in the end, in a very dynamic space, of course, you need to be able to hold your own and be able to also help the analyst further instead of just following orders. So I think those things would definitely be advices that I could give for people looking for a return offer.
Yeah, that sounds very useful. And so after those two internships, as I understand, you moved to your fourth one in total, right. The private equity one, which you're doing right now, Bridgepoint. So what can you tell about this? In general, company.
So basically Bridgepoint is a British investor, and they invest in different verticals. So one of which is, for example, tech, another one is healthcare. And so the reason, first of all, that I wanted to go to Bridgepoint, or that I wanted to work in private equity in general, is that I just like to learn how investors look at companies as opposed to M&A advisors, which is of course what you do when you're in investment banking. You look at it from a sell side perspective and not a buy side perspective. And so that is the reason that I started applying to, for an internship at Bridgepoint. And so up until now, I'm in my last month. I've been really enjoying it. And basically what Bridgepoint does, the Amsterdam office at least, is that they tend to invest in companies between 300 million and 1.5 billion euros. So they currently have a couple of companies in their portfolio. And that is basically what you do when you work, for example, for Bridgepoint. So you just look for new opportunities. I think usually as an intern, you really support the rest of the team. Most of the portfolio works are really doing work with the companies that a PE investor owns is done by the seniors, because of course they have more knowledge, more experience. So that is really something that they do. But you as an intern get to look at new opportunities and things along those lines. And I think in private equity, the work is a bit less, or for example, your working hours are less structured. So sometimes you can have a week where you walk out of the office at 6 or 7, and sometimes it can get quite late. And I think that is also a key difference between banking and private equity. In banking, I think it's just, at least in my experience, you're basically always busy. In private equity, sometimes you have a bit more downtime, some more time to rest. So yeah, that is also a big difference that I've noticed until now.
And like I also know that quite a lot of people, they don't really know what exactly they want to do, investment banking or private equity.
Right.
What would you say they should look at when they are choosing between those two? What are the main signs that, for example, you're better for investment banking or you're better for private equity?
Right. Well, I think, quite frankly, M&A, or investment banking more broadly, is a good breeding ground for people in private equity. So I would say the skill sets have a lot of overlap that you need to succeed in either one of them, right? But I think, again, what I would consider is whether you actually enjoy to do a lot of deals and to advise on a lot of different transactions within a short period of time. So that is what I, for example, enjoy at Lazard and DC Advisory. You get to see a lot of different companies in a very short period of time, right? Sometimes every week you get to see some new companies. In private equity, that's also the case when you look at opportunities, but at the same time, you're also working on the companies, of course, that you acquired. So it's more thinking, for example, with entrepreneurs about how they can, or with corporations, about how to actually become more successful, to grow further, things along those lines. So I think the accent is kind of different. If you like the action of constantly doing advising transactions, then M&A would be, or investment banking would be more ideal. But if you like, also the aspect of actually following the whole process of investing in a company and then making it grow and making it flourish more, then I think private equity would be a better pick.
And it's also quite known that private equity can be a bit more competitive than even investment banking. Do you agree with that? Or
I think that is really difficult to say. So, for example, you hear about a lot of some bulge bracket banks, for example, or some private equity firms. First of all, it really differs per firm, I think. But of course, you never really get to see the statistics. So it's only, hearsay, I think, mostly. But also, you don't know the caliber of the applicants. So if they, some firms say, oh, we have, or the offer rate is below 1%. Well, that's a cool statistic, but of course you don't know the caliber of the actual applicants. So I think no one should be kind of discouraged by when they hear that it's very competitive, because in the end, if you just enjoy, if you just think the work is cool, you're enthusiastic, you just try things out, then I think you will definitely be able to break into the field. So.
And what would you say is an ideal profile, ideal resume for a person applying to private equity in the Netherlands, for example?
Mm-hmm. Right. I don't really think there is an ideal profile, actually. So, I think it is very useful if you want to work for example, in M&A, that you definitely have some prior experience or demonstrated affinity for finance. That is definitely something very useful. But for private equity, I think, it is very similar. You just have to show that you have some affinity with the field. But generally, if you are, for example, in engineering, it's not like they don't want you in banking or they don't want you in private equity. I think actually what they want to see is that you are probably a bit smart and that you can manage to actually solve problems. And I think those are the things that they really look for. And that can be, you can be an engineering major for that, you can be a physics major for that, or a finance major. So I think there's not really an ideal profile. But one thing that I think really helped me is just building up experience within the space and actually, for example, doing the board year at the FSA to show that I actually like the field, as opposed to just liking the idea of working in banking or private equity.
No, that definitely does make sense. Mm-hmm. And just want to ask about your personal preference, if you can tell us, what do you like more, private equity or investment banking? Yeah,
good question. I think for now, definitely the first years of my career, I would like to work in banking first. So that is also something that that I should say about private equity. I think a lot of private equity firms, when it comes to the profile, they like to see some M&A experience before you actually start out in private equity. They might offer you an internship to do, but if you want to come back, for example, as an analyst, usually they would like you to have some M&A experience. And that is definitely also something that I want to build. I just want to work the first years in M&A, primarily because I think it's a lot of fun to see a lot of companies or deals at the start of your career. So you kind of get a sense of what's out there, and you get to orient yourself to more specific spaces, right? So for example, I think consumer is a very fun space, but also tech. I think tech, I didn't really do a lot with it yet, but I really like technology. And by actually seeing a lot of deals as a generalist in M&A, you get to see a lot of different spaces that you might like or might not like as much, and that you can then actually capitalize on if you were to want to go to private equity.
Mm-hmm. So then...
so I don't, to answer your question, I don't really know. I don't really have a specific preference. It's mostly that I know for now I want to work the first years in M&A, and then who knows, I want to stay in M&A, who knows, I want to, in the end, go into private equity.
Okay. So then what are your future plans? Since it's your last month of the internship.
Right,
yeah.
right. So in a month I'm going to New York. So I'm going to do a master's at Columbia Business School. Basically it's just been a bit of a big goal of mine to study in the US, and also a bit of a dream of mine to study in the US for quite a long time. And so basically I spent 1 year, I think a bit over a year, preparing all my applications, and I tried to do it next to a banking internship. That was pretty difficult. So at one point I just took some time off to, you have to take an admissions test, you have to write essays, you have to get your recommendation letters together, which can be, for some universities, for example, 3 or 4. So it just takes a lot of preparation. And yeah, that is what I'm going to do. So in 1 month I'm going to New York and study there, and then see whether I want to work there or move back. I don't know yet, but
that sounds very cool. Congrats on Columbia offer. Yeah,
thank you.
That's cool. Maybe also some students would like to move to US, so I think it's really helpful for them to know the application process, especially since you said it takes quite a lot of time to apply, which is, I think, a bit different from the Dutch universities, where you usually apply just with your grades and one CV and one motivational letter, but yeah, it's different for US. So since we're getting to the end of the interview, I would like you to ask to give maybe a few recommendations to students about, in general, their finance journeys or applications to US or applications to investment banking internships, anything you would like to tell them.
Yeah, sure. So I think one good advice is to just, try things out and see what sticks and what works out. So that is definitely what I did. When I was in my second year at university, I just started applying to Dutch private equity funds. I barely knew what private equity was. I thought I knew, but I didn't really know. And so I got a lot of responses back from people telling me, you could come, you're more than welcome to come for a coffee to talk with us about private equity, but you're very early, so that's not going to happen. But at least I got to interact with a lot of those people in those spaces that you might actually get to interact with later if you apply again. So I think, that is definitely the biggest advice that I could give regarding their finance journey or going into banking. Just apply, try things out. Interviews might not always work out. When I had my first interviews, it kind of sucked. I didn't really know nearly as much as I had to know from my interviews. But then, the next interview, you already know, okay, this and this and this are the expectations of me. So you can prepare properly. Because sometimes, as I said, it's a pretty opaque field. I think if you, for example, are in the University of Amsterdam, it can be pretty difficult to actually know what is the expectation within an investment bank if you apply. So the best way to find that out is just to apply, I think, and to talk to people and to visit events. So that is the second advice I would give. Try to just get your hands on as many events in banking or in private equity as you can. And lastly, I think for the if you want to go study, for example, abroad, I think one big advice I could give is start preparing early, because in the end your grades matter, your extracurriculars matter, everything, the whole package matters for things like that, right? If you want to study abroad at some universities. So that is it.
Thank you so much.
And Mick, one last question, our signature one. If Bridgepoint was a person, what kind of person would he be?
Ooh, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. I think a very good entrepreneur. I find it hard to name one entrepreneur, but I think what I've been enjoying a lot about Bridgepoint up until now is that we really get to look at a lot of very cool companies as a junior, as an intern. Basically, you already get to join a lot of calls with very relatively senior people. And I think, when I look at what Bridgepoint actually does, it has been really thrilling to me, and I would, probably describe them as a very successful entrepreneur.
Nice. And what kind of person would Lazard be?
I think a very wise person. That really knows how to actually advise the entrepreneurs. It's very difficult for me to come up with specific names here, but I think, definitely. What I've noticed with Lazard is that they are very smart people who work there. And they definitely are able to advise entrepreneurs on what to do. So if I would have to describe Lazard, it would be probably a very wise person.
Sounds cool.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.